still in uncharted territory. Chair Baker has asked me to chair it from City Hall. So I'll do that. And hopefully by the next P&Z meeting, we'll be back in person live. So with that, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we will begin with an approval of the agenda. I don't have any additions or comments to make. Do any of the board members have any additions or comments to make about the agenda?
I move to approve.
Okay, I think that was member Boyer. Oh, I got you up in the corner now. I have a motion from member Boyer to approve the agenda as it's been published and a second from Chair Baker. Does the board members have any questions or comments about the agenda? Do we have any members of the public with us yet, Dallas?
Yes, sir, we do. We have no comments.
Okay, no comments from. So with that, let's do a roll call. Member Boyer?
Yes.
Chair Baker?
Aye.
Gavin? I'm just going to switch the first names here. It's going to be easier.
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And Linda, you're up there.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stand and deliver the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to stand with me at home, but if you're not in a situation where you can do that, that's fine. We'll go ahead and say the pledge at this time. I pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America,
to the
to the republic
for which
for which it stands,
nation,
one
One
nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And with that, I'll ask for an approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion from member from Walt. I have a second from Jessica. Right,
Bill, second.
take a second to look those minutes over. Okay. Does anybody have any comments, changes, additions, corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Walt?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Jessica?
Aye.
Gavin?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We're at the time where we got announcements. These are the 2-minute non-controversial kind of announcements. If you want to let us know something that's going on, something that's on your mind for the public.
Mr. Mayor, we have one hand raised, Mrs. Mary Fleming.
All right. And it looks like Janine would like to as well. So let's get Miss Fleming in first, and then we'll get to Miss Janine.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Jim, we're not on the monitor, that's why. Jim Fleming and I are participating in this meeting, so we're not on the screen.
Okay.
So
Are you
that's
calling
why-
in?
Yes.
Okay.
Just want to make sure you hear us and our voices are heard, because
Yep.
this thing on your agenda about this expansion of this paradise, we strongly disagree with this. We live right next door. We have to listen to these dogs barking all the time, and we want.
Well, let's get to that when we get to that agenda. I'm glad you got the audio working, and you were
Okay.
able to raise your hand and notify us that you had a question. That worked as well. So are you comfortable with?
Yeah, but because the last meeting that you had, we tried to speak and we could not. So and
Right.
we told Janine that. So
Okay,
Okay.
apparently it's working now.
thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you very much.
All right,
We'll
Miss
we'll
Janine.
stand by.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Miss Janine, did you have another comment, or were you just trying to get our attention for them? You're on mute.
I hope I'm not taking Linda's thunder, but I saw a date for the Watermelon Festival. I want to say June 20th.
That's correct. Yahoo.
Yahoo.
Finally, some normalcy.
Pockets full because we're going to have to make some money on the auction.
Yes. All right. Here, I hope all the board members heard that. All right.
I have one thing.
Go ahead, Ms. Lynn.
Tomorrow we'll start at about 8:30 at the Legion. Blessed Hope will be distributing food again. No one gets out of their car. All they have to do is drive up I'll put a sticker on the windshield and they'll drive through and people will load the food in their car.
Okay, wonderful.
We served, I think it was over 200 the last time. So it'll probably be around 200 again tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Amy, I think this is April 6th, not May 6th. The agenda I have. It did. Is this the one that got sent out, or is this the one that you just printed for me? Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties here in City Hall. Are there any more announcements from the public? No? Here, and I should explain, guys, we have about a minute delay between when I ask that question, if we have any questions or comments from the public, and when we can be sure that all of the members have had an opportunity to hear that question. So when I ask that question, I'm going to pause for what I'm sure will feel like a fairly awkward 60 seconds, just to make sure that we don't miss any members of the public again. And hang on one second while I'm getting an agenda. I think
Just so you know, Mr. Mayor, it looks like we also have Brian Franco, Pet Paradise, who's the applicant, EDA Consultants, Inc., which is the agent for the applicant, and then Mr. William Tharp also listening in.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any old business? I think I'm looking at an old agenda that I brought by accident.
No, sir.
I am too.
What's that?
I think I'm looking at an old agenda.
Are you looking at April 6th?
Yeah,
Yeah. Try.
I found it. I got it.
Grab
It
Dave's
says-
out. I grabbed the wrong one as well. Amy's printing it off for me right now, though. Yeah. My apologies.
They did lose.
You got yours squared away, Miss Linda?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, man. Okay. So our first item of new business is a quasi judicial public hearing of Southeast of SE 2001. We have two quasi judicials in front of us tonight. I'm going to read our quasi judicial procedures into the record. If no one else joins our meeting in between the two quasi judicials, then we'll move from one to the other, and I won't go through the procedure again. But before we begin, let me explain that once we are in a quasi judicial, we have moved from a legislative body to a judicial body. So we need to make sure that we are just looking at the evidence that is presented to us, and we're making our decisions based on that. This time I'd like to, excuse me, read the quasi judicial proceedings into the record. And in a minute, I'm going to ask the attorney to read the ordinance into the record by title and number. And then I'm going to explain the rules concerning testimony, which I've already alluded to. It's basically that substantial and competent evidence must be met when the board makes a decision, and shall state the following, and I quote: all public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. We're going to begin by asking anyone who wishes to speak to either of these items to go ahead and be sworn in. And the way we're going to do that is to raise your hand, hit that little raise your hand button to let Dallas know that we need to swear you in. He's going to open that up, and we will swear. We're going to say the oath in, and then we're going to ask you to say your name as we go around. So let's see if we can get through this fairly easily. And Rich, are you going to read and swear the folks in for us tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to do that. I do think before we have the oath taken, we should have everybody state their name in addition to raising their hands on the Zoom app. But for purposes of the audio, we should also hear those names.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Are you saying, because that's what I asked for. Are you asking them to say their names before the oath or
Go-
after you
uh,
say the oath?
Go ahead and state your name right now before we take the oath. If there's anybody who plans to provide any testimony, go ahead and state your name. We'll try to do this one at a time, and I'm not sure exactly how to do that, Dallas.
Mr. Mayor, I'll call upon the attendees who have their hands raised,
Okay, thank you.
starting with Brian.
Brian
Brian
Franco.
Thomas.
Different Brian.
Different Brian.
Attendee Brian.
Brian Franco.
Thank you. The Flemings.
If the Flemings could just state their names, please.
Jim Fleming and Mary Fleming. We're muted by the host.
There, we heard you loud and clear that time.
Did you hear us?
Okay,
My
did-
name's Jim Fleming and this is Mary.
My name is Mary Fleming.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, Dallas?
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Janine?
I don't see a raised hand, but I might be asked.
Okay.
Can you
Alright,
hear me?
EDA Clay Swagger in the corner there. It's small, it's hard to see him, but he's got his hand raised as well.
Okay, can you say your name, Mr. Swagger?
Yes, Clay Swagger with EDA. I'm here with Claudia Vega with EDA as well. Good evening.
Okay. Dallas says we've got everybody with their hand raised.
Mr. Mayor, we have one more attendee. Mr. Tharp.
Okay, Mr. Tharp, can you say your name into the record for us if you're planning on speaking to this quasi judicial public hearing of SE 20-1? Does he have his hand raised, Dallas?
Mr. Mayor, his hand raised, but I cannot unmute him. Oh, there he goes.
There you go.
I may have gotten it. Do you hear me now?
All right, we've got you, sir. Can you say your name into the record for us?
Yeah, William W. Tharp, THARP. And I may or may not want to speak, depending on what I hear.
Well, we appreciate you working through this process with us at the beginning so we don't have to go back to it. Okay, now, Dallas, do we have everybody have stated their name for the record who wishes to speak or may wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Rich, will you go ahead and say the oath, and then we'll go back around to everybody and hear them say, I do, into the record. Is that the appropriate?
That is, but let me clarify one thing. I believe all of the folks who identified themselves are speaking to new business item 2. It may be that we have an additional speaker or two for, or a different speaker for new business number 3. And I see Mr. Boyer raising his name right now. So why don't we have him go ahead and he can take the oath along with us, even though we know he won't be speaking on this first item.
Okay, Walt, say your name into the record, please. Unmuted.
Walt Boyer.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and with that, for all those individuals who've identified themselves, if you could raise your right hand at this point in time. Do you hereby solemnly swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Brian Thomas,
Brian Thomas, I do.
Janine,
I do, Janine Mirnack.
Walt,
I do, Walt Boyer.
Dallas, can you call out the other folks that I can't see on the screen?
Brian,
I do, Brian Franco.
Mr. Fleming,
I do, Jim Fleming.
Mrs. Fleming,
I do, Mary Fleming.
Mr. Tharp,
I do, Wayne Tharp.
Was that a yes, sir?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Is that,
I think we
Whatever.
have
Clay
one.
Swagger.
We have Swagger, Mr. Swagger.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And
Claudia.
Claudia Vega here is also from our office.
I do.
Thank you.
okay, and you are all duly sworn.
Dallas, did we get everybody?
yes, sir.
All right. Thank you all for working with us. We are want to move your items forward, and these Zoom meetings are a great way we can get some business done. Okay, now we need to go around to the board members and disclose any ex parte communication. Remember, this is any communication you've had with anybody on either side of the fence on any of these issues that you feel may influence your judgment. Mr. Boyer?
I haven't had any direct communication with anybody, but I have been on Mrs. Fleming's property about just over a year ago, doing some other work with a friend, and it just gives me an idea of the buffering and the way the property's laid out. But it has no effect on any kind of bias.
Okay.
It would not impact that.
Rich, do you have any follow-up questions for that?
No, Mr. Boyer's statement is sufficient, and technically it's not an actual communication from what I heard. But in any event, he stated that he can decide the matter fair and impartially. So that's sufficient.
Okay, thank you both. Ms. Linda, do you have any ex parte communication you need to disclose at this time?
No.
Thank you. Jessica?
No.
Gavin?
No.
Bill?
No.
Thank you all. Okay, that will allow us to move into the presentation order. And the way that this is going to work tonight is that for each item, we will hear an overview from staff first. Then we'll have the applicant presentation, and there's no time limit on the applicant presentation. Then we'll hear from the staff. We'll get their report and their recommendation, also with no time limit. I have not been contacted by any third-party intervener, and the city's not been contacted by any third-party intervener. So we will skip that part. So after we hear from the applicant and the staff, we will go to public comment, where everyone from the public wishing to make a comment will have 3 minutes. Then the applicant may cross-examine, and then the staff will have an opportunity to cross-examine. Finally, we will go back to the members of the decision-making body, who will then be able to ask the applicant or the staff any questions that they have. And finally, the applicant and the staff will have the opportunity to make a final argument. As we come to the end, the city attorney will once again advise the decision-making body as to the applicable law and the factual findings that must be made to approve or deny the application, at which point the board will then deliberate the application. After deliberation, someone will make a motion to approve with conditions, continue, or deny the application. So with that, we will move to the first order of the presentation, which is a staff overview. Mr. Thomas, are you going to be handling that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but why don't I think we got a little bit sidetracked with the whole swearing in process and all that, but why don't I
We have to read the ordinance.
read in the
Thank you.
proposed resolution?
Thank you, Rich. Hang on, Brian, with that staff overview. And Rich, will you read the ordinance into the record, please?
Absolutely. It's resolution number 2020-17, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, serving as the Board of Adjustment of the City of Newberry, Florida, considering an application for a special exception within an agricultural A zoning district as authorized under section 4.4.5.17 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, to allow the operation and expansion of a commercial small animal boarding facility on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, repealing resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate the catch.
No problem.
Okay, I was reviewing the quasi-judicial. I think we got it all now. So now, Mr. Thomas, give us the staff overview.
One moment, please. Let me get this launched. Okay. As we've stated, this is application special exception 20-01 for Pet Paradise. EDA Incorporated are the agents for Store Master Funding 9 LLC, which is the owner. I have to keep moving the little boxes out of the way. SE 20-01 is an application for a special exception and associated site development plan approval. The site is approximately 4.85 acres located at 19518 West Newbury Road, State Road 26. It's just west of Dudley Farms State Park. The current facility has 12,500 square feet gross and is sized for 125 animals, dogs and cats. The expansion would allow an additional 4,500 square foot of gross floor area and increase the capacity for an additional 77 new animals. The associated site development includes parking, internal driveways, stormwater management, water and sewer, infrastructure, in this case, well and septic in the application. This is a general overview of the location. Like I said, it's, I'm sorry, let me, well, I guess I don't have the annotation. There we go. Get my mouse out. There we go. Just west of Dudley Farms State Park on State Road 26, Newbury Road on the north side, a couple miles before you get into town. An aerial shot of the property. You can see the existing facility. It's from the air. You've got the signature dog bone shaped swimming pool. It's, as we say, about almost 5 acres and surrounded on all 3 sides by Tropic Traditions Nursery, which is Mr. Fleming, Ms. Fleming's nursery. This gives you a little overview of the site plan that's been included in the application. You've got the facility expansion in red, a drain field expansion to accommodate the additional facility needs, and then additional parking. They're going to, I believe, double the number of parking spaces. Okay, so before we go any further, I'm going to turn it over to EDA. Mr. Kleisweger from EDA has the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. All right, Mr. Swigger, you're on.
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen from our pre-presentation.
And your mic is just a little bit quiet. I don't know if you can move it a little bit closer to you or if you can turn the volume up a little bit.
Okay, I will raise my voice.
That's perfect.
I was speaking a little softly there. Before I begin, Brian, Thomas, or Dallas, Mr. Franco with Pet Paradise is also on this Zoom meeting, and he was going to present some of the slides. And so I just wanted to see if it'd be possible to make sure that he's unmuted to where he can present a handful of slides as we go along.
Absolutely. Dallas, can you go ahead and unmute him now since he'll be participating in this presentation?
Is Mr. Franco Brian?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, he's unmuted and we can hear him.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I have a presentation for you tonight. Again, my name is Clay Swager. I work with EDA. I'm a certified land planner, and also with me tonight is Claudia Vega. She's a project engineer for this project, and Mr. Brian Franco is with Pet Paradise Resorts, and he's here to provide some additional information from their owner and operator perspective. So I will go through this presentation, and I'll be happy to answer questions as we go along or as we conclude. Again, as Brian Thomas indicated, this property is a little over 4 acres in size, located at 19518 West Newbury Road. It is near the Dudley Farm, just a little bit to the west of that. The proposed facility addition would be approximately 4,500 square feet with 77 additional indoor suite spaces. This is the Pet Paradise facility that's been in existence and operation since 2008 on this property. And our special exception application is put together in a manner to show how we comply with the city of Newberry LDR requirements for what's categorized as a small animal boarding facility. And I'll walk you through that as we present tonight.
Mr. Swagger, before you go on, I just want to clarify that when we're in a quasi judicial, we need to wait for questions until we get to that point in the meeting. So if any members or members of the public have any questions, please jot those down, because obviously it's a little bit difficult to go back and forth between these slides. So take good notes, and we'll make sure we get your questions when we get to that part of the quasi judicial.
Thank you for that clarification. That sounds good. So again, this is just a location map to give you approximate distance from this property to downtown, about 3.5 miles, just a little bit east of 202nd Street. This aerial photo is similar to what Brian Thomas showed you. You can see State Road 26, Newberry Road, a state arterial highway, the existing Pet Paradise facility, and then the commercial nursery that does exist on all 3 sides of the property today. Again, this is another aerial photo, a little bit better resolution showing the facility today. You've got a driveway entrance, obviously, off of State Road 26. You have a parking area, circulation for vehicles exiting back out onto the state road. Facility today is essentially a U shape. And it does have a pool area for the animals, and also a play area here. And then there are run areas that they are able to utilize during daytime hours. I'll get into those specifics in just a moment. Just a brief note or two about the project background. As I mentioned, this was approved by the county in 2008 for what you see out there today. Just recently, the city of Newberry did annex this property into the city limits in 2019. The land use and zoning came shortly thereafter, zoning changes and land use changes to agriculture, which I do believe came through this advisory board. Again, this is a proposed expansion, and the mechanism to do that is a special exception. The maps here you see are the land use and zoning maps for the city of Newberry. And again, the land development regulations for the city of Newberry facilitate the approval of this type of activity through a special exception. So at this time, I've got a handful of slides that I would ask Brian Franco if he's able to walk through from the perspective of Pet Paradise, and just to give you a little flavor of who they are and what they do and what their facilities entail. Brian?
Good evening. Hey, Clay, can you do me a favor and put this on presentation mode? Kind of the bottom right on your toolbar. Bottom right, you'll see a screen. No, one over, right. No,
Sorry.
the other way. One more. No, the other direction. Far right.
Far right. Sorry,
Well, you went by it now. The thing that looks like a screen.
It
No,
wants to be full screen,
there
Clay.
you go. Hit that.
my cursor was not going as fast as I wanted it to.
I don't know what happened there.
Just as a
I think you're
suggestion,
on a presentation now instead of just going full screen. So I think you're recording something.
yeah, if you go back to where you were and then start the slideshow and move up to the slides, it'll give you full screen.
I screwed them up.
Okay. We're all learning how this works on Zoom.
Well, I'm enjoying watching the cute picture of the dog while we're figuring it out.
That should be that one that shows like a screen. If you just hit that.
Or up on the top toolbar, Clay.
Taking over.
Yeah, very top left. Same image. No. There we go.
Hey.
Dallas exerted control again. There you go.
Thank you, Dallas.
I just took over.
Sorry about that, folks. First of all, my name is Brian Franco, Vice President of Real Estate for Pet Paradise. I've been with the company a little over 3 years, and certainly appreciate all your assistance today on the annexation As you may be aware, we've been operating pet resort in Gainesville on this location for the last 12 years. And it's been a terrific resort for us. We've provided a lot of services for a lot of customers, and consistently performs in our top 5 of the 36 resorts we have operating currently in 9 states. We are an upscale boarding facility, very focused on providing safe, clean, and fun environments. And you can see the services we offer: primarily boarding, veterinary care, which we just added to this location, we're excited about, and then day camp. And as you can see, we serve several pets a year across our platform. Next slide. These are really our operational procedures. We run a very tight ship, and we're very focused on being good neighbors. We're next to a variety of different commercial uses, as you can imagine. And in order to be good neighbors, we want to make sure that we have a tight rein on how we manage our pets, our guests. So by doing that, we have limited size play groups. We, our associates, our ratios for every associate, 10 dogs for every associate. Any given time, we might have 25 to 30 dogs in a play group. And we have, trained professionals that work for us and help us manage. All the pets that come in are assessed to make sure that they're compatible, would be compatible with other pets. And there are cases where they're non-compatible. We do have separate facilities, separate suites, and separate play areas as well. We have pipe music throughout the facility, which helps lower anxiety and helps keeps dogs calm. We manage odor and smell in the way described. And again, we want to make sure we have safe and clean facilities. And we have a lot of layers of oversight. We do have regional managers that are overseeing our resort managers. So it's a very controlled process in order to, again, mitigate any nuisances that one might expect from this type of facility. Next slide. This is just an example of some of the newer prototypes, but it just gives you a flavor of what we're doing, the fact that it is upscale, the types of materials we're using, the various play areas. This is our prototype we built a couple of years ago in Jacksonville. And there are some similar elements of this to what we're proposing here. Next slide. And this, again, just gives you some sense of the quality of the facilities that we do have. The lower left slide, left corner with the black fence and that tall building, that is the day camp building. That's a pavilion. It's a conditioned space that we're proposing for Gainesville in the day camp area. And that allows the pets to be out there to be platooned, if you will, in and out, especially during the summer months, and keep them in a environment when they're hot or tired. Next slide. This just gives you a sense of what the interiors look like. The relevant slide picture here is the upper right. This is what our proposed additions would look like. If you've noticed here, it's hard to tell, but we have exposed structure there, and it's got Icynene insulation about 1 foot thick. It's blown to the underside of the roof deck and then sprayed. And what this does is, with the combination of the block walls and the sprayed insulation in the exposed ceiling, it really is a good sound attenuator. As we've developed this in our prototype design, and this is what we're proposing in Gainesville editions as well. Next. This gives you a sense of kind of what our outdoor play areas look like with the pool, and the picture in the middle is our kind of our day camp area that we're proposing. You see we have shaded areas. In this case, we had a vinyl coated fence for security. We can do a number of things with this. We could have a solid fence. We could have opaque screening on it, a variety of things that we can do. The next slide. this shows how we secure our suites. The center picture is the inside. It's a hurricane door, serves as our doggy door. It's weighted, as you can see, on a pulley system. These doors are closed after operating hours, so the pets are securely in. You can see the bottom right and the bottom left. That is the outdoor run. From the right, you see from the inside the door open, and then on the bottom left, you'll see the patio, we call it, where the pet has an opportunity to get out and get some fresh air. But these doors are closed after our operating hours, which is basically in the weekdays, 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Those doors are closed and the dogs are secured inside. And then on weekends, it's 9 to 5. It just gives you a sense of how they're set up on the outside as well as the inside. Next. And then again, a look at our play yards, how we provide shading. This is our swimming pool area, which is surrounded by buildings, which is the case with Gainesville. And I think that's the last. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so that was the last slide, just to give you a sense of the type of product that we're providing for our pets and for guests or customers.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Dallas, if you don't mind putting my screen back on, I'll.
You should be able to share your screen again now, Clay.
Okay.
Clay, do you have something else you want to share on your screen? Clay?
Yes. Yeah, we're getting there,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. I'm just opening up the
Take your time.
PowerPoint again. Yeah, my cursor moves really slow, and that was part of my struggle. So, okay, I would like to continue on with our presentation, and I'll try to wrap it up here shortly. This is a site plan, and all the planning zoning board members do have a copy of our complete site plan. This is the overview, overall development plan, and I color coded it just to help paint a better picture of what's being proposed out there. Again, this area in yellow is the existing building that's there today. In orange are the building expansion areas. The white area are outdoor play areas. The dark gray is the parking lot and vehicular circulation. There's an enclosed dumpster here in the southeast corner. We are proposing to increase our parking more than 2 times. So we're going from 11 to 24 parking spaces. The black dashed line on each side represents the City of Newberry code requirement for building setbacks of 50 feet. The dark green represents the City of Newberry required landscape buffer area on both sides. These areas are stormwater retention areas. They're dry landscaped basins. I'll go to the next slide, and it's the same layout, and this incorporates the existing landscape that is on site today. All of these areas in green represent existing vegetation and tree canopy areas. And also this area with the diagonal hatch over here and here represents a very robust hedge that is on both sides of the property. These were put in as part of the buffering requirements for the county back in 2008. So all of that has grown up and matured over the last 12 years, and we're proposing to keep all of that in place to comply with the City of Newberry's buffering requirements. I want to mention too that because there is a 50-foot setback between the property line and the building addition, that really there's 2 times the amount of area for landscape. We're at 50 feet of landscape area and green space as opposed to the minimum 25 in the city code. So I hope this exhibit helps paint a picture of what's out there and what's being proposed. As far as lighting goes, there is not much being proposed at this time, and I apologize. This is a very hard map to read, but essentially this blue dot, the second blue dot, and the third blue dot are the 3 lights that are being proposed. They're pole lights, LED. These small numbers represent the amount of light foot candles that are being put out. And the most important thing I think for the board is to know this is the property line and that photometric study shows all those at 0.0, which means there's no foot candle light spillage over onto adjacent properties. So these lights are focused down into these areas, and there should be no negative impacts from lighting. This is an exhibit that shows the proposed building additions here, here, and here. And what I've done is I'm showing the west elevations. This is the west elevation of this building, and it's essentially where this green line is. This is what you'd see. This is the west elevation for this building, what you see here. And then this is the west elevation for this building. And so I just wanted to show that there are no runs, outdoor runs facing westward as part of this expansion. The existing facility does have runs that are facing westward. These are all either facing north or south, and that the end caps of these buildings really don't have much activity associated with them. This is a door for employees, but not animals. So I just wanted to paint that picture of how this operation would look as far as what you view from the west side of the property. So I will go quickly through these, but I feel like they're important. It's getting a little bit in the weeds with some planner language, which Brian Thomas and I speak very often, but it's important for the record. So this small animal boarding facility is allowed as a special exception in the city of Newberry in the ag zoning. And the city of Newberry has reviewed this application, the staff, I should say, and they do agree that with our justification that we comply with the applicable sections of the Land Development Code. And I'll walk you through those briefly. And I know that you have seen these in the staff report and my application, so I'll go quickly and come back to anything that you'd like. So the criteria for small animal boarding facilities are shown on this slide. That you must have a minimum area of 4 acres, which we comply with. All animal housing must be completely enclosed and designed to suppress noise, which we comply with that as well, as Mr. Franco had indicated to the board. Letter C, that the structures must be a minimum of 50 feet from any property line. We do comply with that building setback as well. Letter D, there must be a minimum 25-foot landscape buffer, which we do. We have really have twice that amount of distance between the closest property line and all of the existing landscaping that's been maturing since 2008 will remain in place. The use of outdoor areas shall occur no earlier than 7 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m. Those are the city requirements. We actually have a more stringent standard that Monday through Friday, the outdoor areas are closed at 7 p.m. and on Saturday and Sunday at 5 p.m. So we comply with that standard and exceed that standard. Overnight boarding shall be no more than 30 consecutive days. This facility the typical stay is far less than that. And then letter G, the veterinary clinics and the acreage requirement is not particularly applicable in this case. So there are also findings in the city's land development code that need to be addressed. I'll go through those briefly. Letter A is regarding traffic ingress and egress and safety. We have a properly designed and permitted driveway that was approved by FDOT, and we're not proposing any changes to that access point. As far as letter B, parking and loading, we are proposing an increase in parking spaces to adequately serve the site, more than double the amount of parking spaces that we have today. Refuse and service areas really aren't changing. There's an enclosed and screened dumpster in the southeast corner of the parking area. Utilities are available to serve the site. Buffering and screening, as I had mentioned, there is a 25-foot minimum landscape buffer requirement, which we do show how we comply with that in our landscape plan and site plan. We're not proposing any changes to signage. Open space, we actually have almost 75% of the property will be in green space, open space, landscaped areas. Those consist of tree canopy areas, buffers, stormwater retention areas with landscaping, etc. We also need to show that we're consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. There is a policy in the comp plan that addresses the agricultural future land use designation. Does indicate that commercial kennels are permitted as a special exception, but they must have an intensity of less than or equal to 0.25 floor area ratio. And so we comply with that. We're far below that maximum. We're actually at 0.08 floor area ratio. So we're far below that maximum. Moving on, there are other findings that must be made that you must address the land use pattern in the area. We are surrounded on 3 sides by a commercial landscape nursery, and on the 4th by State Road 26, which is a major state arterial roadway. Public facilities, as I mentioned before, they are adequate to serve the site. We've also coordinated with City Fire Rescue to provide the adequate facilities for a safe operation. That the change conditions really in this case are frankly that the business has done well and has a large amount of customers, and they'd like to make one final expansion for their property in order to serve those increased needs. There are really no neighborhoods in this area. We are surrounded by a commercial agricultural operation and a state road to the south. Public safety, again, we have adequate and safe vehicular access through FDOT standards, and have been working with fire rescue to make sure that we have adequate facilities to serve the site. As far as drainage goes, the site has been fully engineered, and the stormwater retention areas meet all the city and water management district requirements. Regarding light and air impacts, as I mentioned before in that slide, there's very minimal lighting that's being proposed here. And the photometric plan shows that there really should be no light spillage, and that the landscape buffers will help soften any impacts visually or noise for nearby properties. And as Brian mentioned and had included in one of his slides, they do have some fairly robust odor control measures because they run a very good and sound operation to ensure there are no impacts in that regard. As far as property values, this facility is is investing millions of dollars on this facility. It's a very attractive professional appearance, run very well, and it should add value to the surrounding properties. Adjacent development. The addition does comply with all the city LDR requirements. There are no elements of the city code that we haven't addressed that are applicable we don't meet. Neighborhood needs in regards to the scale of the city. I would say this is certainly a benefit to the city of Newberry from an economic standpoint of increase of jobs and tax base, and also the region. This facility has attracted customers from other areas that come now into the city of Newberry to do business. So I would say there is no special privilege being granted because we have shown that we've operated in good order and in compliance with all the ordinances for over a decade, and that our proposed addition also complies with the applicable code criteria. And number 13 does not apply, as this does not have any intensive agricultural activities or landfills, etc. These are conditions that I'll let Brian go through in his presentation, but there are 5 conditions that city staff has requested that they be included as part of a potential approval. And we agree to all those conditions, have no objections whatsoever. As the staff report indicates, they are recommending approval with these conditions. We did see in the backup material that there were some comments made by some neighbors, and I sort of categorize them into 4 groups, essentially. I'll go through them very briefly, just wanted to provide a response. There was a concern about that ligustrum hedge, a very large hedge that's on the east and west sides of the property that's growing so well. It's growing into the adjacent property. The Pet Paradise group, the management, would be more than happy to, the other property owner wished for them to access their property, I'd be more than happy to maintain the other side for them as a courtesy. As far as inadequate parking, I think there's a comment made that there did not seem to be enough parking for this facility. I think we are addressing that well, and that we are more than doubling the parking spaces. There was a comment made that maybe some larger vehicles were parking in the State Road 26 right away, maybe to park for a short period of time and drop their dog off and then get back out and go. So that definitely is not permissible for DOT. And the best I think that we could do from an operator standpoint is make a really proactive effort to notify customers that they cannot be parking in that right of way, and try to address it that way. And so there were there's some concerns about noise. I just wanted to make a few comments on that. So I saw in the backup material there have never been any formal complaints about noise out here. We were never been made aware of any as far as Pet Paradise goes. It's not something that has ever arisen. Again, as required, all of these boarding spaces are within entirely enclosed buildings, and that we do actually cease our overnight outdoor activities earlier than the city code requires. Again, Monday through Friday, 7 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, 5 p.m. That there is substantial landscaping out there in those perimeter buffers that have been in place now for over a decade. The building complies with all the setback and buffering standards and the proposed orientation is north and south. And then of course, we have and will comply with the City of Newberry noise ordinance, which does have criteria for every type of use, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, as far as setting decibel levels that must be complied with during the day and nighttime. So with that, I will conclude, and we'll be here for the rest of this proceeding.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Mr. Thomas, why don't you give us staff report and staff's recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see. Let's get back to.
See how fast your cursor works.
Hopefully my cursor works a little bit faster. Finding where we were is another matter. Okay. So because special exceptions are not use that is permitted by right, it gives the governing body the opportunity to set conditions by which the use can be permitted. It does go with the land, and so you know, you want to make sure that the conditions are appropriate, and because they are basically permanent. And so I'll go through these. There's quite a few. There's a few extras in the memo to the Planning and Zoning Board. They're more of a technical nature, but we'll go through those a little bit faster. The first one is if the developer chose to develop in phases, that would be permissible. Each phase has to be developed basically such that if it's not the second phase or subsequent phase isn't completed, it has no effect on the appearance or the operation of the first phase. The site development plans have been submitted. Obviously, they're part of this application. And so the site and development plan will have to be approved before any building permits could be issued. Yeah, obviously they can't get permission to start construction unless the site and development plan is actually approved at the next step by the Board of Adjustment. And then the required site improvements have to be met prior to occupancy of the building. And so if they did do it in phases, or if they choose to do it all in one phase, they basically need to make sure that each portion of that is complete prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy. So there's no elements, especially concerning anything relative to life safety, that wouldn't be complete prior. Signage, they basically are prohibited from putting additional signs up, but that's because they already have an existing sign. And so this condition would basically approve their existing signage as part of the special exception. As long as that sign is up, they can refinish it, rebuild it, replace the front panels, etc. But if they were ever going to remove it, then they would have to come back and get a new building permit and have to be compliant with the city's sign ordinance for the commercial general district. They can put interior directional signage on the facility. And then utilities, they basically have electric provided by Clay Electric Cooperative, so all of the on-site would be in coordination with Clay Electric, not the City of Newberry's electric company or electric service. The water and wastewater right now and for the foreseeable future basically are going to be provided by well and septic system. We are probably a couple of miles away from being able to provide water and wastewater to the facility. However, as is fairly standard with these types of special exceptions, should the city's potable water system be extended to within 800 feet of the property line, the applicant agrees that they would then, within 12 months of notification, connect to the potable water system. Same thing for the city sewer service. Again, right now, the services will be handled through an on-site septic system approved by the county health department until such a time as the city's sewer system comes within 800 feet. And again, within 12 months of notification by the city of availability, they would be required to connect to that wastewater system. And again, should the potable water and or the wastewater system be brought to the perimeter of the property, the applicant also agrees to provide a 30-foot wide public utility easement along the southern border that fronts State Road 26. And that's basically to provide future connectivity further east as the city continues to expand eastward. Again, in practical application, we're probably many, many years away from that, but you never know. And they've agreed to provide the PUE should it become available. And solid waste disposal, they've got the three-sided screening already, and they're agreed to maintain that as well. They've also, as Mr. Swagger alluded to, they have on-site stormwater management in 2 basins that have been engineered to handle actually a little bit more than the amount required for a facility of that size. And they have provided adequate evidence from the photometric survey that they will not be shedding light on adjacent properties from this facility. And they'll continue not to do so into the future. And as far as fire and life safety, they'll all comply with the latest Florida National Fire Protection Association code and the Florida Fire Code. Staff did find and does find that this facility would be consistent with a comprehensive plan. It is allowed for, and they have met all of the required elements and criteria of the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations for a facility of this nature. The approved site development plan will govern the development use of the property, and so construction will comply with that site plan, and once they're approved, the construction plans as submitted and approved by the building department. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that is the list of conditions. Staff does recommend approval of the special exception and site plan application based on the evidence presented by the applicant, as well as the conditions, draft conditions presented to the Planning and Zoning Board by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Again, we do not have a third-party intervener. So at this point, we will move to public comment. So Dallas, if you could put everyone's face back on the screen for us. And then if any members of the public have a comment, and I believe we've already heard from Mr. and Mrs. Fleming that they would like to speak to this issue. So go ahead, Dallas, get them queued up. You're going to have 3 minutes each. So Miss Fleming, if you want to make your comment and then pass it over to your husband, or if your husband wants to begin and pass it over to you. you'll
Okay,
have-
okay. can you
First
hear
of
me?
all,
hang on one. I'm sorry. Hang on 1 second. I'm just waiting for Dallas to get our screen right here, and then I'll give you a go ahead as soon as I can.
Mr. Mayor, I need to leave this screen up so people who are watching on YouTube can.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to depend on you, Dallas, to make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay, Mr. Fleming or Mrs. Fleming, which one are we going to hear from first?
okay, it's Mrs. Fleming, and actually, I am Jim Fleming's mother. I am not his wife.
I'm sorry for the assumption.
I have lived on this property for 22 years on a private residence, which it seems like that you completely ignored on your presentations. It's commercial property is what you said, which is true. My son owns the nursery, but I have a private residence directly next door to Pet Paradise. And I wanted to clarify that, and I want Jim to be able to speak on my behalf.
Is that the end of your comment, Miss Fleming?
Jim Fleming, my son, will take over now.
Okay.
Okay,
Fleming.
so first of all, let me say this. 12 years ago, when they got the special exemption from Alachua County to build this structure that they built, the people at the zoning in Alachua County said, look, if you don't allow this, if you don't want this to be here, we're not going to let it go through. So the guy, his name was Fred, and the guy named Fernando that originally contacted me about this. And I looked at the plan. I said, yeah, this is nice. Probably this is going to be okay. They said that they were going to put a hedge around, and they were going to maintain that hedge on both sides, and they would not be expanding the project. This is what it was going to be. And so I agreed, and they did it. And that was 12 years ago. So for the first year or so, yes, they did maintain the hedge on both sides of the property. But after a while, you couldn't get the landscape guy to cut the hedge on our side. So now we have to, if we want the hedge cut on our side, we have to do it at our own expense. And it's not a ligustrum hedge, it's a viburnum hedge. And it's big all the way around. And it's a lot of work, costs a lot of money to maintain that. So also, this thing about the noise, I can hear the dogs barking from my office back in the back of my nursery. That's BS.
Yeah.
And this thing is going to be built literally right next to my elderly mother's house. So there's going to be a lot of dogs barking. So I disagree with what these folks have said. And this guy, Mr. Franco, he obviously said he's been with the company 3 years. Well, the guys that I originally dealt with, when the county allowed them the special exemption to build it in the first place, they're long gone because they sold it to some other investment company. You understand what I'm saying there, where I'm getting at?
Yes, sir. We're following you. You got 1 minute and 10 seconds left on your comment, Tom.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is we disagree with allowing this, and it sides up right to our property. Where they are going to put this is right next door to where my elderly mother lives, and we do hear the dogs bark. I know they say you don't, but they don't hear. When we have company and stuff, it's you can hear them barking like crazy. So this is what they're saying is not true, and it all sounds good and stuff, but once the dust settles, just like the guy that originally put it there. Oh yeah, we're going to put this hedge around. We're going to maintain it on both sides. That's BS. Just like this guy's probably saying, oh yeah, we'll maintain that. It doesn't get done. So anyway, there's my comments. I disagree with allowing this to go through.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Does that conclude your comment? You still have a few seconds left.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Dallas. Do we have any other members of the public with their hand raised?
No, sir. Oh, yeah. William Tharp.
Okay. Mr. Tharp, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. I have the property directly to the south across Newberry Road, and I can tell you that you can hear dogs barking clearly across Newberry Road on my property. I can't imagine how Mrs. Fleming puts up with that dog barking activity right next to her residence. That's my main concern. At 125 animals, we've got more noise than we need. I can't imagine adding another 77. I would also say, this is 4 acres roughly. Do we need 200 animals on 4 acres? That seems like a lot. If you look at the drawings, I give them credit. They've rather expertly drawn the biggest footprint that they can possibly put on that 4 acres right up front to use all the space available. And I just don't think we need 200 dogs there and the noise. Plus, I've watched cars pull in there and out of there. If you think about how many people must go in and out to drop off 125 animals versus 200, there is a lot of traffic going in and out off the Newberry Road. I can't say that I've seen a wreck there, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We don't need more dog traffic there either. I think we've got enough dogs there already, so I'm against adding 77 more dogs and all the consequences therewith.
Does that conclude your comment, sir?
I think that gets the gist of it.
We appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Okay, Dallas, let's give a few seconds to make sure we don't have anybody else from the public wishing to make a comment. All right, Dallas, do you have anybody else raising their hand?
No, sir.
Did the commenters leave the meeting or did they just leave my screen?
They're still in the meeting.
Okay. All right, we have nobody else from the public wishing to comment. Correct, Dallas?
Correct.
Okay. Now we will move to the ability for the applicant to cross-examine. Clay, did you hear anything either in the staff report or in public comment that you want to ask of staff?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any cross-examination questions. I just would like to make a closing comment when the time is right.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, do you have anything under cross-examination for the applicant?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't have anything. I just would point out, and as Mr. Swagger did as well, I did direct our code enforcement officer, Rick Wolf, to contact his counterpart at the county in code enforcement and find out if there had been any complaints issued in the last 12 years when it was under the jurisdiction of the county, and then also to make sure there weren't any since a little bit less than a year since they've annexed into the city of Newberry, and he was not able to find any record of complaint, whether about noise or any other issue. I just wanted to make sure that was in the record because it was addressed. We were concerned when we got Mr. and Ms. Fleming's comments. We wanted to see how the situation had unfolded over the years.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, now I'm going to go to the members of the decision-making body, the planning and zoning. And at this point, you can ask any question of either the applicant, the staff, or the participants. So if we have the Fleming still on, and if we have Mr. Tharp, you can direct questions to them as well. And I believe you guys are in control of whether you're muted or not. Is that right, Dallas?
Yes, sir.
All right, so just raise your hand if you do have any questions and we'll move through the P&Z. Gavin.
Hey guys, I just wanted to confirm, Brian, in the conditions and your recommendations, you recommended that the applicant connect to city water and sewer when it becomes available within 800 feet. Is there a past project where that number has come from, or where did you guys come up with the 800 feet requirement?
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Chair. That is in our other special exception, approved special exception applications as well. And so we did borrow it from previous language that was in other special exceptions.
Does that conclude your questions, Gavin?
Yeah, I think that's the only question that I've got. I mean, other than that specifically, I didn't notice really anything in the presentation from EDA that stood out as conflicting with any requirements that the city may impose on this expansion. If there are any, could you explain what they might look like?
Are there any conflicts, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Chair, we didn't find any conflicts. As the findings, as outlined by Mr. Schweger's report showed, the staff does concur with those findings as well. And one of the reasons I'll point out, one of the reasons that the conditions don't have a lot of those issues in them is because they will be listed as findings, but then also too, the city code as relates to small animal boarding facilities has a list of requirements that they, regardless of the additional conditions we put on, will have to be met. And so the conditions are over and above what's in the land development regulations for small animal boarding facilities. If they don't comply with any of those, then it becomes a code enforcement issue, and it would be followed up in that manner.
Does that conclude your questions or comments?
Yes.
Okay, other board members, Walt?
Yeah, this is for Mr. Franco. Can he still hear us?
Dallas, is Mr. Franco still on the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Franco, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
All right, go ahead, Walt.
Okay. I love to hear local business success stories. It's great to know that a business is doing so well that they need to expand. My question is, how often is that kennel full? The 125 kennels that you have currently, how often are they actually at max capacity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Member Boyer, as I mentioned, it's one of our top 5 resorts across our 36 resorts. And so really our busy times are, so it's seasonal. We're not full every day of the week, every month of the year. So really goes in the seasons. The summer's busy, so we'll be close to capacity through 3 months of the summer usually. And then the holidays, whether it's Memorial, Labor Day weekend, then the Christmas holidays. So obviously we're not full every week, every month of the year. That answers your question.
Okay, so it's more a holiday, or when families are going on vacation kind of deals, that's when you reach your capacities. It's not an everyday deal.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that.
Okay, does that conclude your question, Walt?
Yes, sir.
Before I move to Jessica, I just want to let the members of the public who are listening know that this is the moment for the board members to ask questions. If they ask any of the participants questions, we can certainly unmute you and you can answer that question. Other than that, though, this is going to be between the board members and the questions that they direct. There will be another public comment before a vote is taken. So if you're listening, don't get discouraged. You will absolutely have another chance to voice your opinion. I just want to make sure we all understand the process we're in, because we are still in a quasi judicial. So with that, Jessica, go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. They all relate to the noise. I know we talked, I know that Mr. Thomas spoke to our code enforcement officer if there had been any code violations reported to us or the county, but what is the noise ordinance limits during the day?
Mr. Chair, the noise ordinance for agricultural property zone districts is 65 decibels at the property line. In the evening hours, it's 55 decibels at the property line. And that's actually specifically called out as well in the the city's land development regulations for small animal boarding facilities as well. The evening hours begin at 9 p.m. I believe Mr. Schwager mentioned this. They believe they start at 9 p.m. and they end at 7 a.m.
And did we send anyone out to see what the noise levels were, since they were included in the complaints in the packet?
Mr. Chair, we didn't send anybody out. That's a possibility. Right now, we don't actually have calibrated equipment, and more specifically, somebody who is certified to use it if it gets recalibrated. And so we would have to contract out for that, or the applicant would need to contract out for that service.
And then I have a follow-up, another question, but this might be for Mr. Franco from Pet Paradise.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Jessica, before we leave Brian?
Yeah.
Brian, when you contacted the county's code enforcement and our own, do those records include someone just calling and lobbying the complaint, or do they only include someone being dispatched to actually test the sound limits?
No,
you always keep a record if someone called and lobbied a complaint, whether we actually showed up?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Mayor, they log every phone call and the nature of every complaint, who the complainant is, whether it was an anonymous call, whether it was a person left their contact information for follow-up. And I can say with fairly reasonable certainty that the process that we follow right now in the city of Newberry for that is the same as the county, because we actually, our code enforcement officer, as you're aware, is retired from the county. He was in charge of code enforcement for the county. And so I'm sure he's following the same methodology that he instilled when he was at the county.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Jessica.
I have another question for Mr. Thomas.
Okay.
In light of that line of questioning. So given our contract with the sheriff for services, if there were a large volume of calls about the traffic issue or noise issues, like complaints about the noise from that facility, would they relay that onto the city in any way?
Typically they do. If it's traffic related, we generally don't hear too much about it. They handle it because that's something that's under their jurisdiction to issue tickets or fines or warnings. We generally wouldn't hear about that necessarily unless it was a chronic thing. Now, if it became a chronic problem and they were writing a lot of tickets, then I assume they, through our assigned lieutenant for the city of Newberry, that they would then contact us to take further steps to prevent it from continuing in the future if it was a chronic problem. The noise, basically, if we got several noise complaints, the sheriff's office is equipped to handle the testing of that, and so we would contact them and request that they set up a time when they would basically, as I understand it, they show up unannounced and go in and do a test and find out. They test for ambient noise, and then they can filter out the ambient noise from the noise generated by the facility.
Jessica, you
Okay,
have
so
another question for Mr. Franco, or another question for Brian?
No. So given all of that for Mr. Franco at Pet Paradise, because there are often situations where a person wouldn't necessarily call the sheriff or call code enforcement, but they're going to call the business. How do you typically handle complaints about parking, traffic, noise issues that come in to each business?
Yeah, I think we would address it as it comes in. I mean, with regard to noise, as I mentioned, we keep a pretty tight rein on how we manage the pets. And if there's a pet or two that become a nuisance in that they're barking loud or incessantly, then they would be taken inside. Whether it's in the play yard or whether it's in one of our patios or our outdoor runs. So we manage that, and the same would apply for parking if we had a complaint from somebody, whether it's from the Florida Highway Patrol or the local resident, then we would obviously communicate to our customers that was not permitted for them to pull up in the right of way. I think the challenge currently obviously is we've got a limited area. I wasn't here when the facility was designed or permitted, so I presume it met requirements in terms of the number of parking spaces. We do have some excess area along the east side of the site where a lot of our employees park to free up. But we're a drop-off business. We're not a park and go in and shop for 30 minutes or an hour. We basically, our customers pull in and pull out. So we would address that, any of those issues directly once they're given to us from the public or the customer or whomever.
Okay, does that conclude your questions, Jessica? Okay, other board member questions? Are you reaching?
Mr. Chair, this is Bill Conrad. Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead, Bill. We got you loud and clear.
Okay. Just a question for the engineer, Clay Swagger. Is there anything that you all would be willing to do to attenuate some of the sound emanating out into your neighbors?
Well, I think that the short answer to that is that and it's not exactly answering the question, Mr. Conrad, but we do have landscaping and a double setback for the landscaped area to try to mitigate impacts. The orientation of the building, we think, is an improvement. I think that short of that, if you were looking for additional sound mitigation measures, I think that might come in the form of fence or something along those lines on a portion of the project area.
Do you have any further questions, Bill?
Yeah, I've struggled with this one because, I live in town and I have neighbors on 3 sides that have dogs and they are very annoying. But I think as a community, we've accepted the fact that people are allowed to have animals and they do make noise sometimes at night. And we have a code enforcement system that's set up to, above a certain decibel level over a certain time period, will write a violation over that. But yet for the last decade, I don't think we've had any complaints of noise come out of Pet Paradise. So I think we're okay with that. And while all of us as a community, we'd like to have complete silence at night so we can sleep better, but we don't. I'm out here at a lake place right now, and at night the sound of the frogs and the crickets is above 85 decibels, which 65 decibels is our limit at which we can invoke the noise ordinance. So I don't think we would be fair to deny Pet Paradise the right to have dogs that bark at night unless we said across the board that nobody can have a dog that barked at night that exceeds a certain decibel level. So while I struggle with this and I sympathize with the neighbors who say we don't want more barking dogs, I also got to accept the fact that we as a community have said people are allowed to have dogs, and sometimes they bark at night. You just have to get used to it. So I'm willing to go along with what Pet Paradise is accepting, and while I sympathize with the neighbors, I think that we, with the 50-foot setbacks and the landscape barriers. We've done about as much as we can do to protect the neighbor. So I'm okay with this.
And Mayor Conrad, would you like me to get Commissioner Coleman out to your lake house and take some of those frogs out for you? We could have a frog leg fry later on.
Yeah, we could talk about that. I'd love to do
Okay.
it.
All right. Any questions from any other board members for the participants? Miss Linda, you got to unmute yourself, Miss Linda. There you are.
No.
Nope. There you are. I think you muted yourself again.
Okay, am I with you?
Yep, we got you now.
Oh, good. Too many buttons to push.
We understand.
I want to have the owner of Pet Paradise to restate that they only board dogs, cats, animals, 30 days maximum. And if we're increasing the size of this facility, are they increasing it simply because they don't have enough room normally for all the dogs? They're not going to be like keeping dogs or trying to raise dogs that they would then resell. I don't know how to word that.
Mr. Franco, could you reiterate that this is a boarding facility and no animals will be kept there for more than 30 days?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We've got you.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. We are not a breeder or a seller of pets. We simply are there to board, to provide grooming and day camp and veterinary services. It's a short term. Most of our customers at the most may leave their pet there for, if they go on vacation, for a couple of weeks at the most. Mostly it's a weekend, it's a week for boarding. But we don't sell anything through our resort.
And Mr. Franco, could you reiterate that the need for the expansion is because this facility is one of your top 5 resorts?
Well, it is, and it's based on customer demand, which is obviously growing along with the greater Gainesville area, which I consider Newberry part of that. And during those peak times, we're at maximum capacity, and we're trying to accommodate our customers. We have customers that drive all the way from Ocala because of the nature of our resort and the quality of it. So we're just trying to accommodate a even broader geographic footprint, if you will, for customers in that area.
Okay, wonderful. Does that conclude your questions, Ms. Linda? Or you got another one?
Well, just the last statement. I just wanted to compliment on the way that the thing looks I never have to board my animals because I just don't. I don't know. So I've never been in there, but from the outside, it looks nice. It's well kept, and it's nice to see a building or a place like that as you're coming into the city. It looks nice and it's well kept.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Walt, was that a hand going up or were you turning the light on?
Yes.
No, I was just changing my lighting.
Okay. Do we have any final questions or comments for any of the applicant, staff, or participants from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will move to final arguments, and we're going to give you, Clay or Mr. Franco, the first opportunity to make a final argument.
Great. Well, I'll start off. I don't really have an argument per se, and I wanted to also give Mr. Franco a chance to speak if anything else he wants to add on. This application, we worked very closely with the city and the city staff to have a code compliant plan that puts together the layout in the best way possible. That, in addition to a strong track record of operating the facility well and within all codes, we feel like it's a very strong application for approval by the city. We feel like we've addressed some of the issues that have been raised by, for example, doubling the parking. Also being a little more vigilant with the customers about making sure they aren't parking in the right of way. I think that driveway is actually extremely safe condition. It's designed based on current DOT standards. It's a right in, right out, but there should not be cars parking in the right of way, so we can help with that. As far as maintenance of the hedge, I put that out there for the city's consideration that Pet Paradise has offered to maintain that hedge on behalf of themselves and the neighbor as a goodwill gesture. So that's out there too. I can imagine that's a bit of a hassle for them if it's growing on their property. So that we've put that out there as well. With that, I'll conclude. And Brian Franco, if you had anything else to say, I think now would be the time. Thank you all very much.
Franco, would you like to?
Just to reiterate, I certainly appreciate the Fleming's concerns, the gentleman across the street with regard to sound. And we don't muzzle pets, obviously, and they bark. We're not saying that they don't bark. I think what we're saying is that we try to manage that. We try to manage it, and we try to be good neighbors. And to the extent that we can enhance the western boundary with more of a solid barrier as in lieu of a fence, we would look at doing that, and in addition to adding some additional landscaping buffer. So we're very accommodating and sensitive. Our facility is operating. It's been operating for 12 years. There's not been any pushback in terms of sound, I guess, on a consistent basis. So we're going to be there regardless whether we add to it or not. We're just trying to provide additional space for our customer demand, and at the same time, we want to accommodate and do as much as we can to help continue to control and mitigate sound. And with regard to our operating hours, the doors are shut at 7 p.m. through the week and 5 p.m. on the weekend. So I don't think we have dogs howling at the moon all hours of the evening. And we run a very upscale facility. And with regard to, falling on our face in the past on taking care of Mr. Fleming's side of the hedge, we certainly work with him to make sure that we're managing that. That's commitment I'm making to him. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Sir. As Walt said, we love it when businesses thrive in Newberry, and we also love it when they work to accommodate the neighbors around them. So thank you on both counts. Mr. Thomas, does staff wish to make a final argument?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think we pretty much covered all the ground.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Attorney, would you please advise the board as to the applicable law and the factual findings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The decision to approve or deny the application this evening must be based on or demonstrated through the presentation of competent and substantial testimony and evidence, which means it must have met all of the requirements under the comp plan, all of our code of ordinances, and all of our land development regulations. And the board is to consider all of the entire record that we've heard tonight. And in terms of the applicable provisions, they're fairly lengthy in this case with respect to the special exception, but just as a reminder, our starting point is 4.4.5 of the LDRs, which is found on page 72 of the agenda packet, which means we need to, within that section, meet all of the special exception elements set forth in section 12.2 of the LDRs, and all of the requirements under the animal boarding facilities supplementary district regulations in 4.2.41, and those are pages 76 and 70 in our agenda packets. So any motion that's brought, it would be, basically, it should be in the form, in terms of an approval, the resolution that I read at the beginning of the proceeding, and incorporate the recommendation from the staff, which would all be packaged up and submitted to the Board of Adjustment for consideration.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Okay, now we're going to open it up to the board for deliberations. Anybody have any final comments, thoughts, questions that they want to pose? If there are none, then we'll entertain a motion. Did I hear somebody?
Yes,
Can you hear? Can you
can
hear
you
me?
hear us now?
Hang on one second. We need a motion before we can open up to the public. So we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
Recommend approval of special exception SE 20-01 to the City of Newberry Board of Adjustment with no conditions.
okay, I have a motion from member Conrad for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second from member Boyer. Okay, are there any questions or comments on the motion on the floor from the board members? And then we'll get to the public. Do the board members have any questions on the motion? Jessica?
Should we add should we amend the special exception to include the consideration provided by Pet Paradise that they maintain the hedge?
Yes.
I thought that was already in there. Is that not
Is
in there?
it?
It's not written in it? Is that just an offer? Or is that, I thought I saw it in writing, but I may have my
Yeah, I
emails
haven't
crossed.
seen
Mr.
any.
Thomas, is that
It's-
in?
No, Mr. Mayor, those type of considerations are usually between private landowners. They don't usually end up in something like this. However, there's nothing that says it couldn't be.
Would that, if we put it in this and the ownership changed, would that be binding on the new owners?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it would.
What if they have to cut that landscaping down and put something else in? Is that, do they then have to seek the approval of the neighbors, or? I don't want to create a situation later on.
As I understand it, Mr. Mayor, if they were to have to take the hedge down or it became diseased and had to be removed, they would still have to come back and replace it with something that would satisfy the 25-foot landscaping buffer requirement.
Okay, let me find out from the board members if there's an interest in adding that. And if there is an interest in adding that, then we'll give Clay or Mr. Franco a chance to respond. Does any other
Yes, I-
board member wish to respond, Walt?
Yeah, that was actually going to be what I wanted to see added as well. I'd like to know that the Flemings, one of their major concerns being that the hedge work costing them to maintain, I'd like to see that added as a condition that Pet Paradise maintains that going on.
Okay, I have two board members. Can I have a head nod from other folks? Okay, Mayor Conrad, are you willing
That's
to?
fine with me. Yeah, I'll add that to the motion.
Okay, you'll add that to your motion. And Walt, you were the seconder. Will you amend your second?
Absolutely.
Okay, does either Clay or Mr. Franco want to respond to that amendment? Are you comfortable with us putting that into the conditions?
Mr. Mayor, I'll chime in. Yeah, we actually are very comfortable with that. That was our intent in our presentation, was to offer that up as a good neighbor gesture. So that hedge essentially needs to be there to provide landscape buffering as a part of the special exception, and to maintain that being Pet Paradise's responsibility is acceptable.
Okay, I guess my final question would be to Rich. Rich, does this bring the city of Newberry perpetually into this hedge question?
You're on mute.
Muted, Rich.
You're muted.
I apologize. No, it does not, other than enforcement of it. Unless that's your question.
That's my question. So the Fleming, so Pet Paradise doesn't cut it. The Flemings now call the city of Newberry to have it enforced, not Pet Paradise.
Well, that would be a forum for them to pursue that, and it would be up to the code enforcement officer whether to take that up with Pet Paradise.
Okay.
Can
So
I
in a
make
way,
a
this,
comment? I'm sorry.
in a way, this would bring the city of Newberry into this conversation.
Yes, from an enforcement side of it. Yes, yes.
Can I make a comment? Can
Is
hear
that
me?
you, Mr. Franco?
Yes.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I do have some concerns about that. Then it becomes a question of whether it's been adequately trimmed or not, and who's making that decision. I think, and also it doesn't put any kind of time frame of whether it should be trimmed every 30 days, every 2 weeks, I think you would be subject to adding additional conditions. The other thought I had was, in order for us to trim this hedge, I'm presuming we have to go onto Mr. Fleming's property. So getting permission to do that, there's a variety of thoughts that I have with regard to, adding it as a condition. I'm willing to maintain it. If you want to add it as a condition, I think we got to add some other parameters around.
I would actually be rather uncomfortable with us adding this as a provision, because I think it brings the city of Newberry into a situation where we'll always be asked to be the mediators and the judge of, is it being trimmed often enough? Is it being trimmed properly? Those kinds of things. If the board wants to proceed, I absolutely think there's a way that we can do this. And I think we could proceed tonight and just ask staff and the applicant to, and maybe Rich legal to draft up some language of what that would look like, so that everybody can be comfortable that this couldn't be used, as a tool. I'm upset, and so I'm gonna, demand that you trim the hedge every week, or I'm gonna, say that it wasn't trimmed adequately enough. Those kinds of things. Walt?
So I was looking at it as more of a protection for the Flemings, but I'm thinking if we just make it a requirement that the responsibility is Pet Paradise's to maintain, that it would be between Pet Paradise and the Flemings as to, making the arrangements to get on the property, what the expectations of maintenance would be.
Rich, is that possible that we can put a condition in that simply says that Pet Paradise will work out an arrangement, but the city of Newberry is not responsible for mediating that arrangement or enforcing that arrangement? Or they've already offered to do it,
Right.
So
Right, that's possible too. It obviously, there's a little bit of speculation. I think the points are all well taken on this. There's a little speculation any way you try to put together some kind of arrangement that's going to go into the future. But we could put some, and we can work with the owners leading up to the Board of Adjustment meeting, and see if we can come up with something that would work. It may have less detail, or it could be significantly more detailed. And of course, the Board of Adjustment may have something to say about that as well.
could we push it forward to the BOA as a desire of the P&Z to see something about this worked out? But since we don't have the language in front of us tonight, that would give staff and the applicant a chance to kick this around, and then we bring it back in front of the BOA as here, if you want to put this in, here's what it could look like. And hopefully everybody would be happy with that. Is that possible?
Certainly, that's a viable option as well.
Okay. Walt, would you be comfortable with that?
I am, and I've got confidence that the Flemings are going to want to be as good a neighbor to Pet Paradise as they have been the last 12 years, as Pet Paradise has been to the Flemings. So I'm fairly confident that they'll be good and fair to each other. So, but
I agree, but remember that this agreement would then bind, if the Flemings sell their property, those new property owners would have this to hold over the Pet Paradise as well. So we have to make sure we write up something that everybody can live with, even different parties could live with.
Well, in the same vein, if Pet Paradise sold, they would be, the new
Right.
owners would also be responsible for maintaining that.
Right.
So it's kind of, I mean, you would expect it to go both ways.
Right. I'm just saying, I believe in all parties here. We have to think about the parties that aren't in front of us because they're not part of this yet.
Yeah.
Gavin, are you?
I just have a question about, so if the recommendation or if the motion this evening is just to recommend that language be drafted to address who's responsible for maintaining the hedges, will the Flemings have an opportunity at the Board of Adjustments to explain why that's important to them? I just want to make sure that their voices that they've shared with us tonight are heard as to the reason why we're recommending that be done, so that
They're going to have a voice here tonight in a few minutes. As soon as you guys are done talking about it, the public will have a chance to speak to the motion.
I mean, after this meeting, before the Board of Adjustments, will they have another opportunity to?
Yes.
Reiterate? Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So I guess we're back to the maker of the motion. Bill, would you be willing to change your motion to your original motion, along with a recommendation that the applicant and staff work out some language for a potential amendment to this resolution?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, I have a motion. Waltz, do you second the third round of this motion?
I definitely second the third round.
Okay, awesome. Are there any more questions or comments on the motion on the floor, which is to approve this resolution with all the conditions that staff has brought forth, and to also submit a recommendation that staff and the applicant work out some language that could be included about the hedge? If there are no more further questions from the members, then I will move to the public. Any more questions from the members? Okay, Dallas, if you have been keeping track of who's been waiting, it's going to either be Mary Fleming, I think, or her son first up.
Yes, this is Mary Fleming speaking.
Yes, ma'am. You're on.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to express that about the noise, the formal complaint of noise level in the past. I have not done so. You are correct in that, because I try to be a good neighbor, as Mr. Boyer has said. And that is the reason I have not done it. But if this increases to be 75 more, you can believe that my voice will be heard, and I will file complaints. And also, it's a lot different than having, I understand that dogs bark, which I've understood for 12 years. I understand that. And my son has dogs as pets. Other members of the family have dogs as pets, and I love dogs myself. However, it's my situation right now that I don't own one. But it's a lot different than having a pet dog, even dogs that are your neighbor dogs, than having a kennel next door to you, a boarding kennel, that it is such that Pet Paradise has now, much less with 75 more.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. Does that conclude your comment?
Yes, thank you. My son wants to talk now.
Okay. Come on, Mr. Fleming.
Can you hear me?
We got you loud and clear, sir.
Okay. So number one, I want to say, like I said in the beginning, the last time this happened, when they built the thing 12 years ago, when I gave it my blessing, because I own three parcels of property around it, they agreed to maintain that hedge on both sides. That was not done. There was nothing in writing. I do appreciate the board's willingness to put this in writing. That being said, this hedge right now needs a really severe cutback, because it's reaching way over my property. At first, they maintained it for the first few services, then nothing. So now it needs a heavy cutback. After it's been cut back and maintained, okay, then I think, being in the plant business, which I've been in for 40 years of my life, if that hedge is maintained quarterly, if it's trimmed once every quarter, every 3 months, then it should be sufficient, and it should be a nice hedge. The existing viburnum hedge that goes along the eastern side of the property and the western side of the property. So right now it breaches way over onto our property. Unfortunately, the plant business hasn't been quite as profitable as the dog renting business lately. So I haven't had the cash flow to do it, but it needs to be done right away. It needs to be cut. It's breaching way over onto our property. And the original first people that built the Pet Paradise said they were going to maintain it, which they did at first for the first, maybe year, and then they stopped. And no matter how much I asked them to do it, they stopped. Their lawn maintenance people said, no, we're not doing that. By that time, Mr. Fred and Mr. Fernando had probably sold it to some other investment group, and here we are today. So I do appreciate your willingness to put this into the language. Me being in the business, I think that once the hedge is severely cut back the way it needs to be done now, both top and sides, then after that, quarterly trimming of the hedge should be more than sufficient. That's my
Does that conclude your comment, Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, I mean, because obviously you guys have made up your mind that you're going to approve this, but that's what I have to say about the hedge. We don't like the fact that there's going to be more dogs literally right up next to my mom's house. But I mean, if that's what you guys decide, that's what you decide. I do appreciate your willingness to put the hedge issue into the language because right now, it's a problem.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate the comment.
Yeah.
Dallas, do we have anyone else with their hand up from the public?
Yes, sir. Mr. Franco has his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Franco.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Mr. Fleming put a timeline on it, and I think that's something we're amenable to. First of all, dealing with it directly now, and getting it trimmed back, and then I think having a time frame associated with it makes sense. Quarterly basis, we could certainly sign up to as well.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Right now, the BOA is tentatively set to hear this on May 26th of 2020. No? Is that not right? Hang on one second, I'm being corrected. Well, that is Memorial Day, which means we'll probably be moved to Tuesday. So that's the roundabout time frame that staff and the applicant would have to figure out the language for this amendment. But it sounds like everyone is willing to work this out. So I have every confidence that we're going to have a friendly resolution here. Dallas, do we have anybody else with their hand raised?
Just a point of correction. May 26th is the Tuesday. We factored that in when we said that would be the estimated date.
There it is. Okay, so it is May 26th. That is still tentative. The commission will decide for sure on the 11th. Okay, Dallas, do we have any other hand raised from the public?
I do not see any other hand raised at this time.
Let's give just a few more seconds to make sure we don't miss anybody.
I got my hand raised.
Is that Mr. Tharp?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Tharp.
I'd like to ask Mr. Franco what the capacity at other Pet Paradise resorts would be. And is this larger, smaller?
Okay, so you can ask questions through the chair, but if you ask questions through the chair, then once we leave you, that'll be it. So do you have a comment that you want to make before you lose the floor? Or is that the only thing you want to know?
Well, it depends on the answer.
That's why
this is going to be the largest. All right. And if this is ranked within the top 25%, I want to know why is that? Why would we have a large capacity boarding place in Newberry? And is it because we're drawing people from Ocala and other surrounding areas because they don't want to have as many dogs concentrated in one area?
Okay, does that conclude your questions and comments?
Yeah.
Okay, Dallas, before we move any forward, I'd like to ask Rich a couple of questions. one, the Mr. Tharp's questions. Are we legally allowed to ask that of Mr. Franco about his other businesses and their? I mean, I see where Mr. Tharp is going with this, but I'm not sure in a quasi judicial, what's happening at his other places is relevant and pertinent information to this one.
Well, that's a good question. I would just refer the chair and Mr. Mayor to the rules of evidence that govern this proceeding, and the fact that the chair has discretion to determine whether certain types of evidence are relevant and material to the proceeding. If the finding is that it's not bearing directly onto the issues in front of the board tonight, then you can instruct the board to not consider that evidence, or we won't go any further into it.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm chairing for you, but you are still the chair. So your thoughts on this question? Do you feel like knowing the capacity of Pet Paradise's other resorts is pertinent to our decision here tonight?
So I would say from the perspective of being able to make sure people feel that their voices are heard, and in the manner of that it might pertain to capacity here, I think it's worth hearing what the answer is. That if there are other businesses are 100 versus 250, or that we're doing even more business than their usual businesses. Does that make sense?
Okay. All right, Mr. Franco, would you mind answering the questions that pertain to the capacity of your other resorts? Are they comparable to where you're trying to get the capacity here? And have you run into resistance on expansion in your other facilities, which would predicate you wanting to expand to this location?
Well, yeah, I have no problem answering it. I think from a ranking, it's probably in terms of size, our top upper third, if you will, of the 36 resorts will be with the expansions. Nowhere near the largest. Our largest resort is in Charlotte, and we'll have over 600 pets in a busy weekend in Charlotte. So it's significantly less in size. With regard to why the expansion? I mean, we try to locate in communities that are growing, and obviously 12 years ago we recognized the greater Gainesville area as a growth market for us. All we're doing is growing with it and trying to just accommodate the continued demand. Obviously, we're done as far as our capacity here. It's never going to get any bigger beyond this. We're going to continue to operate it the same way we are currently with the existing. There's been a lot of good comments about, and this allows us to add a few more full-time jobs for the community as well. So I think hopefully it's a win-win. And again, I think we're going to do everything we can to accommodate. I think the solutions that we've provided with regard to more than doubling our parking can hopefully accommodate the concerns Mr. Tharp has with regard to creating unsafe conditions with people pulling outside the road. And we need to be more mindful of that regardless of that condition happening, to make sure that they aren't doing that. But and then with regard to the orientation of the additions, it's really as Mr. Swigert provided, we're exposing the ends of these buildings to the west. So we're mitigating, we're not putting outdoor runs directly to the west. So I think we're trying to do everything we can to continue to be good neighbors and accommodate and deal with the concerns of our neighbors. With regard to the folks that come from Ocala, people have a lot of concern about their babies, and their pets are very much their babies, and they're always looking for a quality facility, and some people will travel miles to find one. That simply was the reason for my comment about the Ocala. It's not that Ocala doesn't want any dogs barking in their backyard by any stretch. In fact, we're looking in the Ocala area to provide a facility for that community as well, because it's underserved. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Dallas, do we have any other members from the public who'd wish to make a statement or ask a question? Let's go ahead and give a few seconds to let them get your attention. Okay, Dallas, have you anybody raised their hand or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Flemings have their hands raised.
Okay, but I've already heard from both of the Flemings. Are there any new participants?
No, sir.
Okay. Still no one, Dallas? No new participant wanting to make a comment from the public?
Nobody who hasn't already commented, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And we have a motion properly seconded on the floor. I know the minute taker would like me to go in the same order, but your boxes keep moving on my screen. So I'm not sure what the original order was. So I'm going to ask for a roll call from Walt first.
Aye.
Aye. Jessica.
Aye.
And then we have Gavin.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
And Bill.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Again, this will be heard tentatively by the BOA on May 26th. I look forward to staff and the applicant working out that language. And again, all members of the public will have another opportunity to see that final language. And if you're still not happy with it, to voice those concerns to the Board of Adjustment, which is your Newberry City Commissioners. And the quasi judicial will work just the same. So you'll have an opportunity to make a comment during the process, and you'll have an opportunity to make a comment before the motion is voted on. And with that being said, we will close this quasi judicial and immediately open up the next quasi judicial. Dallas, have we had any new members enter the public since I explained the procedure for the quasi judicial?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to move right to asking Rich to read this into the record for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 2020-16, which is application STUP 2020-02, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Newberry, Florida, considering an application for a special temporary use permit as authorized under section 14.10 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, providing approval for a special permit for temporary use on 1.89 acres consisting of 0.59 acres within a commercial intensive CI zoning district and 1.3 acres within an industrial I zoning district as provided in section 4.4 on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Newberry, Florida, on tax parcel numbers 02261-005-000 and 01989-000-000, repealing resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Rich. Now, I know that we already swore everybody in for both quasi judicials, but I'm not sure I made it clear that I was asking for ex parte for both. So I'm just going to go around quickly to make sure we cover that base. Walt, you're the applicant here. Are you stepping off the board to make the case?
I will step off the board to make my case, considering I won't be allowed to vote.
And I'm assuming you've had some ex parte conversation with yourself on this.
A little bit. I've been known to talk to myself. Yes.
Okay. Jessica?
I have none.
All right. Linda?
None.
Gavin?
No.
Bill?
None.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and disclose that I have talked to Walt about this possibility. I obviously don't have a vote, but I did want to make sure that it's clear for, I'm not quite sure how many weeks or months, all of my days are kind of blending in. We've been trying to get to this point. I also want to recall a recent issue to your mind, because I think there are some similarities. Remember when the mine came before us in a quasi judicial, it was a little bit confusing because they were coming here saying, this is the work we've done. But before we spend any real money, we want to make sure that the P&Z approves of the idea in concept with all of these conditions. And then if you do, we're asking you to say yes, move it forward to the commission with those conditions, and with a caveat that if the applicant doesn't meet those conditions, then staff has the authority to yank the project. So, and that's, I think, similar to the situation that we're here tonight. The applicant is going to give you a concept. He's going to give you a list of conditions that he and staff have already worked out. He's going to ask you if you like the idea, if you want to have any more conditions. And then I'm going to ask you to give staff that power to add in that last comment that if the applicant doesn't meet the conditions, it doesn't have to go before the commission. Staff has the authority to just terminate the project because he hasn't met the conditions. So before we get into questions about where the experts, those kinds of things, I just want to draw that comparison. Is that a fair comparison, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think it's right on target.
Do you agree, Mr. Boyer?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with that, we've had our ex parte. Rich has read it into the record. Rich, you have any other comments?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify with respect to Member Boyer's recusal. He will be allowed to participate in the deliberation. He just won't be casting a vote. And we'll have to make an assumption that when he is participating in any deliberations on a motion, that he's doing that in his capacity as a member and not the applicant. The fact that he talks to himself a lot is going to confuse it even further, but we'll work with him on that.
We'll muddle through, right?
That's right.
Okay, staff, you want to give us an overview?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me find that one. One moment, please. It's one of those things where you had it up and ready to go, and then when you go back to find it, it's
crashed.
It's not there. There we go. Okay, one moment. Let me get back to the Zoom. Okay. Okay, as was stated, this is application for special temporary use permit number 20-02, an application by Torment Factory Boyer Management Group, agent for Pat Post, the owner of the property. It is a quasi-judicial public hearing, as you mentioned. It's requesting a special permit to allow a temporary use on a specific site in the city of Newberry. In this case, it would be a haunted house in an industrial and commercial intensive zoning district surrounded by residential. It would be held for the month of October 2020 and also the first weekend in November. And by month, I mean the weekends of the month, Friday and Saturdays of the month. It's on 2 contiguous parcels down south of Newberry Road on Seaboard Drive, and it's approximately 1.89 acres. It's actually the available property for parking and such, probably more than that, because the Mr. Post owns the adjacent parcels to it as well that could be made available, he says. This would be a request to hold Newberry's first ever Torment Factory haunted house. Be substantially similar to Torment Factories that have been held in Gainesville and Trenton in recent years. It would operate from 7:30 p.m. until midnight, only on Fridays and Saturday nights in the month of October, and then potentially the first weekend in November. Plans for the nighttime events, of course, include the haunted house, which will be conducted strictly inside the warehouse that's on the site. And then there'll be some outside scare areas and room for a couple food trucks. Setup periods would be 2 hours prior on operating days, and they'd be done with cleanup by 1 a.m. on the evenings. There will be a ticket gate, gated entrance into the house. They'll be limited to groups of 8. He'll have parking attendants, and signage will be used to direct traffic along Seaboard. Ingress and egress would be from Newberry Road. There would be additional emergency access available on Southwest 5th Avenue. However, traffic would not be directed in or out of the event onto 5th Avenue out of deference to keeping as much traffic off of the local residential streets as possible. According to Mr. Boyer, in the past, they have not needed law enforcement presence at these events in Gainesville or Trenton, but that situation as part of conditions would be monitored, and if warranted, then he would arrange for some additional security. In the description from Mr. Boyer, ample parking for at least 75 automobiles, but they are not anticipating the need for that many at any given time. It'd be spread out over the course of the evening each night. The fire chief will evaluate the area that the haunted house will actually be in and establish what the maximum occupancy at any given time is. You comply with that. There will be, of course, noise from screaming. At least if it's successful, there's going to be screams. Most of it will be coming from inside the haunted house, but there will be some outside scare effects. And so, general identifier, the location, you can see, excuse me, let me get my annotations back up. Whoop. I just hit the wrong button. Bad news. You get to see all my, there we go. Move too quickly, there we go. My mouse moves too fast, unlike Walt's mouse, which moves too slow. Okay, you can see Newberry Road here. The dotted line is the actual railroad track, and State Road 45. And so adjacent to the railroad line is Seaboard Drive there. We'd be directing people off of Newberry Road right by the railroad tracks and down, in and out, and then back out. Again, 5th Avenue is directly south, but traffic would not be directed onto 5th Avenue and up 254th. It would be directed back up Seaboard coastline. Looking at the surrounding zoning map, the properties in question, the northern part is zoned commercial intensive, the southern part is zoned industrial. The surrounding area is zoned RSF2. This across the railroad tracks, you've got PD, which is also residential, and RSF2 as well. To the north, of course, on bordering Newberry Road, you've got commercial central business district and commercial general zoning. The green line here represents the actual property lines between vacant parcels and actually built residential parcels. And I put that in there just to demonstrate that there, even though this area east of the green line is zoned residential, there currently are no residential structures on any of that property. It's vacant. And in fact, a fair amount of that is owned by the same owner, Mr. Post. But these parcels to the east or west rather of the green line do have residential structures built, residences built there. And then one more before we turn it over to Mr. Boyer. just to give you an aerial view of what's actually on the ground there. And so again, this is the old warehouse where the haunted house would be conducted. You can see there's quite a bit of parking area to the south of the warehouse. And so again, the idea is that traffic could be directed down Seaboard Coastline. It would either enter here and then exit, or it could come all the way, people could come all the way down, park, and then exit and head on back out. With leaving 5th Avenue and 254th Street strictly as emergency access if necessary. And so with that, that's the staff's overview, and Mr. Boyer would like to speak to the application. This would be the time for him to do that.
Okay, Brian, was that the overview, or
Yes, sir.
was that your
Overview. That was the overview.
Okay, all right, Mr. Boyer, have your application. You have no time.
I just want to say that Brian did a really good job with his overview. You know, a lot of the property that's zoned residential up to that green line is actually, to my knowledge, all of it's owned by Pat Post. Everything east of that green line. And I also maintain all of that, so it's a lot of mowing. But there's also a lot of buffer, a lot of trees on the properties that are adjacent to where the warehouse is located. Everything, you know, there's a huge tree buffer to the west of the actual warehouse itself. So I just wanted to make sure I added that.
Okay, does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Boyer?
Yeah, until I can think of some more things.
Well, you'll have plenty of chances left during deliberations, right?
Yep.
Okay, Brian, go ahead and give us your staff report and recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Get back to presentation, which unfortunately it doesn't just take you right back in. Okay, so the application would not be scheduled in front of the City Commission for their consideration and approval until first a safety inspection and analysis has been completed by the building department. You know, first and foremost, they just have to make sure that for this particular temporary use, it is structurally sound for occupancy other than storage. You know, it is a building that's been there for probably 75 years, weathered who knows how many hurricanes. The latest windstorm, I think it lost a couple of roof panels, but that was about the extent of it. And so staff doesn't think there's going to be an issue structurally, but before the application goes any further, we would make that as part of the conditions. And then likewise, of course, the commission approval would be conditioned on satisfactorily meeting all of the requirements in the PZ report to the commission, many of which, as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, is similar to the previous temporary use permit that we ran through the Planning and Zoning Board and the commission. Can't really be accomplished until Mr. Boyer has the special temporary use permit in hand, because they would require going out and spending funds at risk without knowing the status of his application first. And so while there will be some things that have to be done prior to going before the commission, a substantial number of the conditions can be met after the commission has reviewed the application, and assuming they agree with those conditions and pass the permit or allow the permit to go forward. Obviously, it's conditional on meeting all those, and any of those that are not met by the end of the period before the event would start would be grounds for rescission of the special temporary use permit. Again, as I just stated, if they're not met prior to the opening, the permit can be rescinded. Obviously, the fire department will be working with the applicant to establish the emergency operations plan. The we will work with the applicant to create an updated sketch of the area showing all of the different things. And again, some of this will be dependent upon what the fire chief determines is the maximum occupancy, because Mr. Boyer would be basing how many, say, porta potties on the actual crowd expected based on the occupancy allowed and things like that. And so as more information becomes available based on those issues like occupancy, it allows Mr. Boyer then to make more definitive plans on exactly what's necessary to meet the requirements. Section 1410.11 does allow temporary uses permits issued by the commission for in agricultural, commercial, and industrial. Things like commercial circuses, carnivals, and other and outdoor similar uses, which we would categorize this as a similar use to that. Specific items must be determined and addressed as findings. And some of the standards of evidence, the differences between a temporary use permit and a special exception. Consideration for a temporary use permit, the hazards or nuisances would be suitably separate. With the separation we pointed out, we think that that's there. We think there's plenty of buffering and distance between the residences and the event. The traffic, we think, according to previous patterns for these events in other areas, that it's not going to create excessive traffic, that there's plenty of roadway to absorb that traffic and parking to absorb that traffic. Just mentioning parking, we don't think it's going to be an issue with this because there's quite a bit of available parking space. In fact, Mr. Boyer pointed out, this is where the Newberry Main Street Festival used as parking as well. And that was a one-day, roughly about 1,200 participant event. They didn't all park there, but quite a few of them parked there. So it's a pretty sizable area. And of course, there's the specific time requirements, and then appropriate conditions and safeguards would be setting reasonable time limits and things like of that nature. The standard of evidence is generally a lower standard because it is a limited time event as opposed to a special exception, which is more permanent. Higher standard of evidence for the special exception because you're granting permanent rights. And some examples, hand-drawn site plans are allowed for something like a special temporary use permit as opposed to a special exception, which you would expect to see in professional engineered drawings. You can get statements from local law enforcement as to opinion rather than necessarily a traffic engineering study. Estimates of sound noises versus an actual study. And so we did draft some findings and conditions. And this is written as a draft for the Planning and Zoning Board report that will go to the commission. That's why the language is in the form it's in. As far as nuisance and hazards, Planning and Zoning Board found that the special use permit for temporary use condition to require compliance with the noise regulations. Planning and Zoning Board found traffic plan directs vehicles down Seaboard Avenue to minimize traffic on residential streets. Again, we talked about parking. We believe that there's adequate parking. Specific time requirements, as we mentioned, it would go from setup would be 5:30 to 7:30, and then it would be operational 7:30 to midnight, and then cleanup done by 1 p.m. only on Friday and Saturday nights. And additional appropriate conditions and safeguards. And we'll get into those in just a moment. And so draft conditions, it would be to allow, sorry, there's just a lot of verbiage here to quickly run through.
You're doing fine.
It would grant them the right to operate only on the weekends in October and the first weekend in November. Again, open to the public from 7:30 p.m. to midnight. Any violation of the time or any of that it would be grounds for rescission of the special temporary use permit. It's strictly conditioned and contingent upon the successful satisfaction of all of the conditions that would be put in place by the fire chief and the building department in terms of structural safety and safety and emergency plans. As we mentioned, structural safety inspection would have to be completed prior to the application being forwarded then to the next level, which would be the city commission. Entrance would be from Seaboard Avenue via Newberry Road. Fifth Avenue would be used only for emergency vehicles. Permitted uses, and we've gone through those basically. All of the uses would be consistent with the attached site plan, showing the general plan for parking and traffic circulation, where the food truck vendors are going to be located, where the restroom facilities would be located, those kind of issues. Portable lighting for the parking area, just because there's no lighting down there, but it would have to be pointed away from the residences so it wouldn't disturb the neighbors. And it would comply with the city of Newberry's noise ordinances. The emergency and operations evacuation plan, of course, would be Mr. Boyer will work with the fire department to finalize those plans and to get to the point where he has an approved plan by the fire chief. The final occupancy calculations, again, would be working with the fire chief to determine what those are. Accessible restrooms, those will be portalets. Let's see. Of course, the food vendors that are going to be there, the food trucks are actually regulated by the state in terms of licensing. So provided they have their state licenses, that should be adequate. Fire department inspection of the haunted house would be required prior to each event on the first day of the weekend. So they would potentially be out there 5 and possibly 6 Fridays prior to each opening, just to make sure nothing had changed or been overlooked. No alcoholic beverages on the site. It's a long list, I'm sorry, but it goes on.
Ryan, I'm sorry to jump in here, but can you go back a slide? You said no alcoholic beverages, but the condition is written alcoholic beverages are prohibited. I'm sorry, keep going. My mistake.
Okay, no problem. You're right. It could be worded the other way. It'll be a little more clear. Okay, yeah. So again, limit attendance to prevent overcrowding or unsanitary or hazardous conditions, not clogging the right-of-ways. Any need for on-site law enforcement? Again, based on previous performance of these type of events, there hasn't been a need, but it will be monitored to make sure that if a need is there, that Mr. Boyer will arrange for some sort of additional security. Proof of liability insurance. And any use of the structures in excess of 120 square feet meet requirements of Florida Building Code, most current edition. Permanent structures, of course, meet Florida Building Code requirements and the Florida Fire Prevention Code. The safety and traffic related plans will be submitted to the city for review 60 days prior to the actual event. So right now we have a pretty adequate amount of time, and so we should be able to get these things narrowed out, and then the plans finalized within 60 days prior to the event actually starting. Signage would be limited to event identification signs. Similar, you know, we've decided to allow event signage, temporary signage. In this case, because the event is going to run all month long, what we're suggesting is that temporary signage, directional signage could be put out the day of, before the event starts at 7:30. The afternoon, they could start putting out the directional signage. And then by noon on Sunday, it would be picked back up each weekend, so that it's not out all week, every week for over a month. And so based on those findings and consideration, or conditions rather, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of Resolution 2020-16 to the City Commission, contingent upon compliance with the recommended findings and conditions and any others the Planning and Zoning Board deems appropriate to add on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. All right, we have not been contacted by any third-party intervener, so I'm going to skip through that part. We've now come to the part in the meeting for public comment. Anyone in the public wishing to speak to this will have a 3-minute window. And Dallas, if we have anybody with their hand up now, we'll go ahead and let them in. If we don't, we'll give it a few seconds to make sure we don't miss anybody.
We need the Jeopardy music playing in the background.
All right, Dallas, have we got anybody?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and move to the applicant. Did you hear anything in the staff's report that you'd like to question, Mr. Boyer?
Brian stated incorrectly that the actual haunt hours, he had stated 7:30, but it's from 7 to midnight.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that. But other than that, no, I mean, he again presented it well.
Okay.
He represented everything that we have discussed up through this point.
All right, thank you, sir. Did staff hear anything from the applicant that you'd like to cross-examine?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move it back to the members of the decision-making body who now have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant or of staff. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask? Jessica?
I had to unmute myself, sorry.
All right.
So I have a couple of questions. At one point, I thought I heard Mr. Thomas say that entry will be limited to 8 people at a time. So how does it work?
Okay, in the actual haunt, which is inside the warehouse, we only run a group of max 8 people at a time through the warehouse or through the haunt itself. That way it gives our actors chance to reset for the next group to come through. So we send them through in waves. We send 8 through, and by the time the first group is about through, then we'll send another 8 through, and our actors have already been able to reestablish themselves for the new group. And
where, oh, sorry.
Actual occupancy of the warehouse will be established by the fire department, fire chief. And so we're waiting for the final numbers as to how many we can actually have waiting to go inside the warehouse, waiting to go inside the haunt, because obviously we're going to have a line. So we'll have people staged waiting to go in, and then we'll have people outside waiting to come into the warehouse because of the body limitation, the occupancy limitations.
And so another question I have is on your satellite image of the warehouse that there's an exit, the haunt, outside scares, food trucks. For the outside scares, what type of buffer and how big is it there? Since that will be where a lot of outside screaming probably takes place, is my guess.
That area is probably, I want to say it's probably 50 foot deep, and the buffer is probably another 75 to 80 foot. I mean, before you get to a tree line even. I mean, and then, you know, then there's an actual tree line, you know, with heavy, thick trees. I recommend coming out and vision. It's hard to describe it. I recommend seeing it.
Well, and the satellite is dark, and I mean, I understand it, but like,
Yeah.
you know,
Satellite's old, doesn't do it really any justice.
I think that's all the questions I have right now.
Okay, Jessica, does the board have any other questions for Walt? Gavin?
Yeah, mine just kind of piggybacks off of Jessica's question to the outdoor noise area. Just in my mind, if you've got someone, you know, running around chasing people with a chainsaw with no blade at midnight, it's going to be pretty loud. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, Walt. If that's, you know, if that's the environment that they'll create outside, or if it's a different type of scare tactic that might not be so loud, you know, with the machinery or something like that.
We haven't quite decided what the outdoor scare is actually going to be, but we want it to be where it directs the flow coming out of the warehouse back towards the parking lot where the food trucks are, where we'll have, you know, portalets. But that's the idea of this, the outside scares. A lot of it's going to just be decorative, you know, like dummies. They're, you know, most of our actors are going to be inside, but we'll have a live actor on the outside, to monitor people coming out and then kind of chase them in the right direction. You know, they may have some kind of noise popper, but it will be quick. Whether it's a chainless chainsaw, which I don't like particularly, or just some kind of noise popper, but it'll be something to herd them in the right direction.
Okay.
And that's the idea of the outside scares. You know, a lot of tombstones, maybe some zombie looking effects or zombie creatures on the ground, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Does that conclude your questions, Gavin?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the other board members?
It looks like
Linda, are you trying to get to the mute button? Are you
Yeah.
unmuted?
Come on.
There you are. We got you.
Well, why does it keep unmuting? What is that? Are you doing that to me?
No, nobody's doing it to you.
That's
We
your
never
job?
do that, Miss Linda. Never.
Yeah. I'm not asking a question.
Okay.
And I'm only going to state a concern, and it's that the whole thing is in a quiet neighborhood. Well, this is a question. As long as everything's going fine and nobody in the neighborhood complains, we're good. No problem. I don't have a problem with all of this at all.
And I'm sure that's
But
exactly what
we all know that decibel count don't count for much. But what if we start getting complaints from the neighbors? Because this is a weekend thing. There's elderly people living down that street and in that neighborhood. I think just where are they supposed to, who are they supposed to call? Are they just going to call City Hall and say, I was awake all night? I don't know. That's my only concern and all. It is. It's a good idea, but it is in a neighborhood.
Well, I think that's the primary concern, you know, is just how do we mitigate that so that we can bring something to the town that I think all the kids and folks would enjoy without, you know, alienating the people that are right next to it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Walt?
I was going to say, the first couple of nights will give us an idea of the types of sounds we're actually looking at, because obviously sound carries more at night than it does during the day. In saying that, I'm trying to mitigate most outside noises, except what's needed to kind of herd people through to get, so that they're not going over to the car wash, because that's the exit side of the haunt, is that car wash side. So I have to drive them back around the building, and the easiest way to do that is some kind of scare right there. But the buffering right there is probably also the greatest, versus the along that whole stretch. That's probably where it's the heaviest. So, but whatever I have to do to mitigate any kind of complaints as well, besides shutting down, but we have to get through the first night or two before we know exactly what we're dealing with.
Okay, other board members, Jessica.
So actually, what Mr. Boyer said, the way this is written, it sounds as if, and perhaps I'm misunderstanding how these conditions are written, but if, say, the first night, because he won't know what the sound levels may potentially be, though I know they have run-throughs, but you don't have a live audience. If someone complains because of the way these conditions are written, if someone complains, code goes out there and determines it's in violation of these conditions, is this automatically revoked, or does he get an opportunity to remedy?
Brian or Rich?
Yeah, Mr. He would have an opportunity to remedy. We would discuss the complaint with him. He would be able to come up with a strategy to do some kind of mitigation or a reduction in the noise and try again. And if it became a chronic thing, like if you had, night one, night two, there's a lot of complaints. He goes back and he changes things around, and we go to the next weekend and we have night 3 and 4, and it's no better. I don't see a situation. I think that, again, because of the temporary nature, it would have to be pretty chronic and pretty substantial before it would warrant rescission of the temporary use permit just for noise. It'd be a different issue if it was life safety concerns or something like that. Then you'd have an immediate cause to pull the plug. Something like noise, because just the nature of the event, I think we would try to, it's not a requirement that it would be rescinded. We would have the leeway and the opportunity to work with him to make some changes and improve the situation over the course of the month.
Okay, Walt.
I also wanted to let you know that majority of the noise is going to be inside the warehouse and within a maze that's built in 100-foot section of that warehouse. So we're working on containing the majority of the noise, but when people go outside, they're going to be laughing, they're going to be screaming. We're going to have that one obstacle or the fright scare place with a live actor. But it's going to be hard to keep everything down low. But I mean, obviously we're going to do our best to make sure, we're operating in good faith with the rest of the community. I don't want to upset or piss anybody off, but the event does kind of have noise. It's definitely not like a carnival. We're not going to have music playing and stuff like that, but it's basically going to be some screaming as people are running through.
Okay, other board member comments, questions? Linda? Unmute yourself.
Now,
You got you loud and clear.
I don't understand this. Okay, Mayor Marlowe
Yes, ma'am.
and Walt, honestly, the noise from that building is not a concern of mine, honestly. And I want the kids to have fun. And I'm assuming it's going to be some of my own kids that are going to be there screaming. And
hope
they
so.
should have a place. That's good. Another issue that none of you have brought up, because we talked about inside the building, outside the building, parking. What do these kids drive? What do they drive, Jordan?
Are you talking about their vehicles?
I am.
With some audible pipage?
I am.
Or lack
And
thereof.
what would be more fun than running down that street? And not you, Walt. I'm not taking this on you, but I'm just saying.
Are you saying my truck is loud?
Yeah, but I mean, we get complaints at the high school constantly from the neighborhood because of the pipes on the kids' trucks. And I can hear them. You know where I live and you know how far away Kathy's house is. They wake me up sometimes at night when they're leaving over there. But that could be an issue that none of us have thought about. And there's no resolution. There's nothing you can do, but it is going to be, they are going to be there. They're going to be rapping on the pipes.
I agree. You know, I as I tell folks who complain about that, you know, I think it's a fairly small number. You know, they just have really loud pipes.
Yes, they do.
You know, I hope you know, I know that Waltz is hoping that they're a repeat. They come back every weekend, but I think, you know, people move on. So probably they'll come one weekend, maybe another. You know, and I agree with you. I'm not sure that there's a resolution to that. And if there was, it would have to do with ASO or code enforcement, not Walt.
Right, exactly. But the neighbors, I'm just, you know.
Right. I feel you.
Can you see them going in front, taking a right, flipping back around to the main street there, taking another, again, coming and just going around that 2-block area there over and over and over, because that's fun.
Well, Walt may hire them to be part of the response.
Yeah, I can keep them off the road by hiring them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just give me their names.
Okay, I've got a list of them.
All right. Any other board member comments? All right. I don't see anything else from the board. So we're going to move to final arguments. And Walt, you're going to have the first shot at making a final argument, if you'd like to. That music, that was a good argument.
Yeah, that was actually my phone and my ringtone. I'm hoping that the board, you know, approves a special the temporary use permit. I'm really looking forward to bringing a haunted house, you know, to the city. You know, Halloween's probably my favoriteest holiday, as anybody can attest to when they come by my yard on Halloween. And it's something I've been wanting to bring to the city for a while, and just now have the opportunity to put things together to create this event. I think it's a good way to keep the kids entertained, occupied, out of trouble, and you know, it's fun. So I mean, that's basically all I've got to say.
All right. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. Staff, Mr. Thomas, do you have any final argument you made?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think we covered all the, but I will say the intent that we've talked about with Walt is that we will not be allowing anybody to turn right coming out of the parking lot onto Fifth Avenue and then through the neighborhood. They will be physically directed to turn left and go back up Seaboard on the way out. To try to mitigate exactly what you're talking about. Just simple traffic through the neighborhood would be an issue. The trucks would definitely be an issue, but they'll be either cones up or people to stand there to direct them out or something. But yeah, that definitely, we will work to contain that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Attorney, would you please advise the decision-making body?
Thank you,
That's
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, we are governed by the substantial and competent evidence standard, taking into consideration all the testimony and evidence that we've accumulated on the record here this evening. Need to make sure that that standard is met with respect to all the elements of land development regulation 14.10.1 concerning nuisance, traffic, parking, specific time, duration, and any other reasonable, appropriate conditions and safeguards.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Okay, I'm going to close the quasi-judicial and open deliberations. So does the board members have any deliberations? Mr. Boyer.
Can I ask the applicant something?
Absolutely.
In the maze, do you have adequate egresses or safety measures designed into the maze to get people out if they needed to be? Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Boyer. That's a great question. Actually, we do. In that 100 square foot area, this was submitted, but I didn't see it in the package. This is a sample maze. This is probably based more close to design or what we're going to be basing the maze on.
Lift it up a little bit, Walt.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. If you see, you'll go into the maze here. The entrance of the warehouses is over here. So you'll go in the maze here, and roughly every 25 feet, there'll be a way to get people out of the maze. If they're scared or if they have some kind of life safety accident or something like that. So we've got the safety features built into the maze, and it's also how our actors will get from one area of the maze to another. So those will be marked for the participants.
Well, you're supposed to say once you go in, no one comes out alive.
Well, I'm leaving that to you guys to find out yourself.
All right. Okay, so any other further deliberations? If not, I'll entertain a motion to Jessica.
So with traffic, will there be somebody out on 26 directing the traffic for the event onto Seaboard for this?
At Newberry Road, we'll have yard signs, stating where people can, to come in, the direction signs. Seaboard Road's already one way in, one way out. You can't run 2 lanes in. So, but at the warehouse, we will have attendants on the ground directing traffic into parking, and we'll be directing traffic out. So that way we create a smooth flow for people coming in and people coming out.
Does that answer your question, Jessica?
No. But yes, but so Seaboard can't have traffic in both directions at the same time?
No, you can have 1 lane coming in and 1 lane going out. You can't have 2 lanes coming in at one time and 2 lanes going out at one time.
Oh, okay, yes.
I'm not limiting traffic. It will be used as the standard road that it is.
Okay. No, I don't have any further questions.
Okay. Are there any other deliberations? Is the board ready to make a motion to approve with conditions, continue, or deny the application? Not everybody reach for the microphone at once.
I'll make a motion to approve the special permit with the conditions as outlined by city staff.
Okay, I have a motion to approve with the conditions that staff has outlined. I have a second from Gavin. Okay, I have a motion probably second on the floor. Are there any further questions or comments from the board members? Okay, hearing none. Rich, is there anything we need? Oh, okay. I lost Rich. Thought he was reaching for the mic.
I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Were you trying to say something or are you ready to go to public comment?
No, I wasn't. I was just going to recommend, if the motion does pass, that Mr. Boyer may want to consider bringing his scariest mask to the commission meeting as further evidence.
Good idea. Good idea. I'd like to see that mask.
I thought he already did.
It
had to be said. It had to be said.
I was waiting. Okay, then we'll move to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would wish to speak to the motion on the floor, which is to approve the application? Let's give a few seconds, Dallas, to see if anybody chimes in. Dallas, is there anybody else even in the meeting?
Mr. Mayor, there's nobody in the meeting, but they could join by telephone, but there's currently no
All right.
comment.
Give a few more seconds then. Okay, hearing nothing from the public, we'll move to a roll call, and that will be Jessica.
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Gavin,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Boyer. You're on to the next step. And that brings
Thank you.
us to a conclusion of our new business, and we are at topics from members for discussion. Walt, do you have anything?
I would like to, once we get this thing going, I would invite city staff and our planning and zoning members to a courtesy trip through the haunt, just to let you guys experience it.
I'm not coming.
I'll go with the goes.
Thank you all. It was very nice of you. Jessica?
I have nothing.
Linda?
I have two things. Garden Club plant sale, May the 16th at the Pocket Park.
Okay.
Remind everybody to come. Plants are really going to be at a good price, and we need to try to move these plants that we've held on to for so long. And what was the other thing? The plants. Oh, city staff, Brian and etc. Thank you. They do such a wonderful job, and that's a hard job, but they cover everything, explain it nicely. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And the attorney.
Walt, did you think of something else?
I did. You never made an announcement as to when this was going to go in front of the city.
I think Janine was trying to get my attention for that. Janine, do you have the date?
No, it's actually, Brian may want to comment, but it's in the agreement that it's after the fire and structural, right?
As soon as we can get a structural inspection scheduled and completed and get the results of that, we can go forward to the next available commission meeting after that.
So we have a little bit of work to do before we can confirm a meeting. We got to meet all those conditions.
Okay.
Not all of them, but.
And just also a point of order so everybody knows, the way the special temporary use permit works, we don't have to provide any public notice, advanced public notice prior to this meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board consideration. But we will have to do the standard public notice prior to the Board of Adjustment, or excuse me, the City Commission consideration. So it'll be, even though we did put a sign out in front of the building, it'll be advertised, there'll be a signage, and it'll be a mail out to the 400 foot perimeter around the property. And so that might likely generate some additional input from community, neighborhood residents.
Thank you for that, Brian. Gavin, you got any topics?
I do not.
Okay, Bill?
No, just that I miss seeing you guys. This social distancing is kind of getting on my nerves. I'll be glad when we can get back together again.
Well, we're glad you're down there at the river getting a little bit of relaxation in. Rich, you have any topics?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to wish Chair Baker a happy birthday. Congratulations for making it through a 3-hour P&Z meeting on your birthday. Well done.
Well done.
Happy birthday, Jessica.
Happy birthday, Janine.
Well, I was gonna say happy birthday week to Jessica and Dallas.
Whoa, we got 2 birthdays. All right. Happy birthday, Dallas.
Happy birthday, Dallas.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Dallas, and happy birthday, Jessica.
All right. Does staff, Brian or Wendy, you have any final topics for members?
I do not, Mr. Mayor.
Wendy? No?
She might be out walking the dog.
Okay.
No, I don't have any.
Well,
I'm not walking the dog.
thanks for sticking with us through this. I want to say thank you to everybody for making it through the first day of the Florida reopen. I got a lot of compliments from residents and businesses about being able to reopen and handle it appropriately. And it sounds like everybody was very responsible and wore masks when they needed to and those kinds of things. So I just want to say once again, thank you to the community for taking this seriously and doing what you can to help bring that curve down. That's the only topic I have. So if I don't see anyone else remembering anything, to Rich, to ask you if you had any topics for members. I don't want to leave you out, Rich.
I've covered everything I need to.
Okay. Then if there is nothing else, we are adjourned. Good night, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.